Good morning and welcome to another week of Journey with Christ. I am your host, Mark Mitchell, a preaching minister here at the Park Avenue Church of Christ in Charleston, West Virginia. And I'm joined as always, and I wish I could change that word always, by Steve Fox, a minister for forever.
Well, you may get to change it, Mark, because
you're going to be gone for a couple of weeks.
Susie and I are going to be gone. Our plans are we're going to be gone for 2 Sundays. We have to go to a baseball tournament where our grandson's playing, and then we got to have a granddaughter who's graduating from high school, and she's gotten offers from several different academic schools, because at our house on every Thanksgiving when she was little, somebody'd say, "Where's Laurel?" And she's over in that corner reading a book. She'd be over there for 3 or 4 hours and nobody know where she was or what she was doing. So she spent a lot of time becoming academic, in contrast to some other people in my family. So we're going to Tennessee for a couple things, and I guess you won't be able to say, as always, Steve Fox is with me.
Yeah.
Did you find somebody?
No, I'll probably get Sean to come in, one evening and do it.
Well, probably get a drunk monkey and replace me.
Well, we know that's the preacher's job. That's all it took. But no, seriously, you will be missed. And I guess you have a special topic for us today.
We have a topic that people don't talk about very much, and I'm really excited about this topic because once you become a Christian, the basis of your Christianity is, what do I do that Jesus taught?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't become a Christian and then just erase everything and start all over.
Well, there is a small segment of our faith is, except Jesus, it don't matter anymore.
But our life's goal should be, I want to learn more about Him and figure out how to do it like He did it, right up to the very end.
And you know how many times I've said this, and to me, I think it's absolutely one of the most critical things that we set our mind on as we do anything, is just like Adam and Eve, when God tempted the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they wanted to decide. Mm-hmm. Every human being out there has to come up with the conclusion. All right, who decides?
And then when you say God told them not to eat of this tree, but it's called the tree of knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil. So if they didn't have the knowledge of good and evil, how come they disobeyed God?
Yeah.
If they did, well, never mind. Boy, that's a long path to follow.
Well, yeah, that'll get you into some holes.
This is what we're going to do this morning. I don't know how much time this will involve. I have 1, 2, 3. I have 6 things written on a piece of paper. We might cover one, or we might cover all 6. But
I've already read the first one, or first and second one. You and I probably not getting by the second one.
Oh no! We didn't do the second one.
No, I said I've already read the first and second.
You read it. You read it.
I've read them all. I know after we won't get past the second.
I thought you meant you read them while we were sitting here, and I was going to say I don't remember any of that. There's lots of times I don't remember. Susie will say, "Well, you said," I said, "I didn't say that," and then 3 or 4 people in the room will say, "Yeah, you said that." Happens during sermons a lot.
Yeah, well.
We're going to look at what the world teaches us, the basic fundamentals of what the world teaches us. We're going to look at those ideas, and then we're going to flip the coin over, and we're going to talk about what Jesus said about those ideas. And there's a lot of things where the world did not at all come close to being what Jesus wanted them to be.
Well, I would even throw up one other caveat to what you're saying. The world doesn't even agree with everything they say either. So there is and I understand exactly what you're meaning by the world says. It is actually anything that is different from what God says.
That's right.
That's what the world says.
And there are a lot of people who live by some of those rules, even though they wouldn't call themselves Christians or they wouldn't call themselves believers, but they act often in certain ways where it looks like they're believers, it looks like they're doing something good. And so some way you got to filter that, and like you said about your definition of the world says one thing. It's kind of like what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount. Moses said this, or the law said this, but I tell you. So that's what we're going to do with the New Testament. We're going to look at 6 things that the world usually teaches, and the world usually wants people to follow, but they're not right.
No.
It's not the way we're supposed to.
And the world changes. I mean, look at the last 5 years, where now some of these things some of these discussions that we could have over right and acceptable behavior, I mean, we've gone nuts as a world.
When I wrote this list, I purposefully wrote this first one down first.
Yes.
Because I thought if we can handle that one, we can take a shot at the other 5.
Well, you think we now live in a world now that says, no, that's not exactly right either.
Yeah.
We might as well quit hiding it from them.
Could you read for us Mark 10, 6 through 12, please?
Okay. But at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. We could stop there.
And talk about a lot of stuff.
For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. When they were in the house again, the disciples asked Jesus about this. He answered, anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another man, she commits adultery.
Piece of cake.
Yeah.
If you want to get a bunch of preachers and get them ticked off with each other, put about 15 preachers that you know of, liberal, conservative, however you want to pick them, and put them around a table and say, what do you think Jesus taught about marriage, divorce, and remarriage? And then get out of the way, because the sparks are going to fly.
Yep.
And you're going to have people in that circle who are totally different when it comes to their ideas than somebody across the table, but they are also convinced that unless that guy across the table agrees with me about divorce and remarriage, he's not going to make it.
No.
And we have put a lot of people in such stressful situations. We have put them in a situation where their life is probably going to be miserable if they yield to everything else that the opposition is giving them.
Given the premise of what we're talking about, though, Steve, the world says, and what Jesus says.
Let's go there first. What does what?
Well, I mean, from the very beginning. But at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we live in a world where now aspects of our world says that God made them wrong. And nobody knows for sure whether they're male or female till they get older and they decide. Not making no difference of what the genetic disposition is, the DNA says. We now live in a world where we have human beings deciding as God the outcome of things and trying to manipulate the world into believing that these things are all okay.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw you pick this topic, I didn't know to what end you were going to go with it, because with the way our world is right now, we definitely need to look at what God says, because people are listening to the wrong people.
Well, let me start a fire and then dump some gasoline on it.
Don't get burned.
I know that the Bible talks about male and female. I know the Bible talks about homosexuality, even though some people say it doesn't. I know some people are very satisfied. They don't see anything wrong with homosexual marriages. That bothers me a lot because we're going to look at what Jesus said.
Yeah, he defined everything here.
But the transgender thing, which is, just within the last 2 years or 3 years or 5 years.
Well, where it's taken center stage.
Yes. I am perfectly satisfied and would not tell anybody they're doing wrong. If I had this man's body and I thought like a girl and I wanted to do things like a girl and I wanted to dress like a girl, I think it would be our objective to try to help that person be what they want to be. Now, that doesn't mean that God made a mistake. That doesn't mean that, okay, here's a girl that wants to be a guy, so that means God made a mistake. When people come to me, and this has happened many times in my preaching career of 50 plus years, when people come to me and say, I have homosexual thoughts and I'm dealing with these and I'm trying to figure out what I am and who I am and what I'm going to do with my life, when they say that to me, and it's happened a lot, I've even baptized a couple girls that ran track for me who found themselves in that situation. You know what I tell them? We're going to have to go find somebody that knows what they're talking about, because that person is not me. Because I don't understand the concept. The concept is just crazy to me. I can't think like that. And so I say, I'll help you find some people who have some Christian values who can maybe help you through this.
Well, let me ask you something.
Well, let me say one more thing.
Okay.
That's a whole lot better than going, don't do that. And that's what I know a lot of preachers have done. They've talked to somebody in that situation. They say, well, that's sinful. Don't do that. We owe those people a little bit more than don't do that.
We do. But I would argue also, if your premise is that your feelings are right no matter what the reality of truth tells you, okay, then which one of them is probably pursuing the wrong ends?
But you know as well as I do that there are a lot of people who have those feelings and want to change, but they don't have the power to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
The same way you and I might be involved in a sin, and I say, I'm going to stop that. I'm going to, please help me, because I'm going to.
The power of lust is.
Yeah.
In fact, I've got 1 John chapter 2 verse 15 in some of my notes, because here is where somewhere around. And this element happens constantly, has happened constantly throughout history, because there are moments where we put a greater emphasis on truth and understanding than we do the relationship that it has with the way we feel. And but that pendulum swings every now and then to where the feelings trump truth. Okay? Where's that pendulum going to be in 50 years? Where we came from the last 50 years. Because we're swung all the way over to feelings now, where every feeling, in fact, their feelings has gotten so strong even in the Christian reality that a lot of people's quote idea of understanding biblical concepts is, yeah, but I just don't feel God's like that. I don't care what this says. I don't feel God's like that. Which is why we are where we are. Here's
the way I look at that situation. When Susie and I were dating, I kept looking at her and thinking, I always wondered what the girl would look like that I married. Because in my head, there were things going on when I met Susie that gradually I came to the point where I was saying, I don't want anybody else. I want her. I want asked to marry her. I want to do whatever I can to make her say yes. And that was what was going on in my brain. Okay, here's another guy on the same college campus who's looking at this other guy and feels the same way that I did about Susie with this other guy. Now, he either is going to say, I'm going to live this way, or I know that's not right, according to the Bible, and I'm going to try to do whatever I can to make myself fall in line with the definitions that are found in the Bible. And that's tough.
Absolutely. But you also...
people aren't faking that. They're not faking that. Those are real feelings.
Those are real feelings. But let me ask you this, Steve. The problem with the understanding of feelings, there's also people who have feelings for children. Given the logic that comes about by saying, okay, well, that other man's feelings was personal. That was his personal preference. Well, at one point, do you say, okay, well, you can be a pedophile, and that's perfectly okay, too?
But even in that case, if somebody says, I know this isn't right, and I want to stop doing what I'm doing, there are people who are saying, please God, help me change. Please God, help me get on the right path. And you can do that with any sin.
But okay.
But you're right.
We can take feelings, and there are people out there who have some of the craziest feelings that I would look at. I want to keep this thing as pretty, but if you look at human nature and look at the lusts of some individuals, there's some strange cookies out there.
Well, speaking of strange cookies, if you backed me into the corner and made me answer that question, I would be the first one to say there are a lot of people who have feelings that need to directly go back to the Bible and look at what the Bible specifically says. That does not give them the right to say, I'm going to live however I want to live.
Sure. Well, they have that option, but they live with the consequences of it.
And you can do that with other sins as well. Maybe
Absolutely.
I don't like that guy, so I think I'll kill him.
Yeah.
Now, I got to do something with that in my head. I got to do something that says I'm going to try to follow the laws of God and the laws of Jesus since He's my master. And I'm going to try as hard as I can to make sure that I fall in line with that.
Every one of us will take our life and measure it against something. Because there is an innate feeling inside of us that where we're always questioning, like you mentioned in the get-go. What should I do? You're always asking that question, what should I do? Okay, the problem we've had is now the world has redefined that question. Well, what do you feel? What do you believe? They've given people license to do whatever they feel is acceptable. Until we also live in a world where if there are certain things, and a lot of Christians know this, it's perfectly okay to love whoever you want, but it's the same people who would say you can love whoever you want say, well, you can't love God and tell everybody about it either.
Well, we were talking about, what's happened in the last 50 years. And please, I don't want anybody in our audience to misunderstand me. I think there's a special place in hell for people who do certain things to children. And there's a special place in hell for people who do things to adults. So, as an example, in the last 6 months in this county, in Kanawha County, there was an elementary counselor who was arrested because he was making some films that involved kids. And he was arrested, and he's in South Central Jail. Trial is coming up, I think the first week in June. And then there was another lady, I don't know her well, but I know her daughter very well, who was physically abusing some kids in elementary school
With
who were special needs
learning
kids.
disabilities.
Now, how do somebody, in my mind, somebody has to be mentally ill to do that to a child.
Well, but here's the thing.
There are other people who are saying, I feel right doing that. So
Yeah.
that's how we got to go from what does the world say to what does Jesus say.
What does God say?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And now I want to make sure everybody understands that I'm sympathetic and empathetic to anyone whose what they feel is in conflict from what they read in the Bible.
Yes.
Because I'm telling you, there are times I deal with levels of lust, even to this day, not to where I was once in my life. There are the list of various things that God hates, and pride, and greed, and lust, and injustice, and hate, and anger. There are just things that are feelings that are so dangerous left unchecked. It's amazing to me that God from the very get-go told them, you've got to listen to me or this is not going to work out for you. Mm-hmm. You have to.
The difficulty of that we've already addressed can come in any form in a person's life. Susie and I used to tease each other all the time. We'd be at the mall and there'd be a girl in front of us. Now Susie's going to look at that girl, and what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to look over to the wall on that side, or I'm supposed to look at the wall on that side? And so I started telling her, I said, when we see a girl that I'm thinking about that, I said, I'll just tell you, there's another girl that I don't have a chance with. So we can eliminate those things. People have things in their minds that, I'm ashamed to say this, but almost come out naturally. I look at, I told Susie the other day, we were walking through the mall, and I said, boy, whoever threw that dress on her, pert near missed.
Well,
And you can't just walk through life blindfolded.
No.
You can't say, okay, help me get from A to B. And
well, that is the downside to some of our Puritan ethic history.
It is.
Because we wanted to sweep everything into a closet and pretend like it doesn't exist. Well, that's foolishness.
And one of the great freedoms in that whole aspect is when you find out there are other people like you.
Oh.
When you find out that somebody else is struggling with that, when somebody else is dealing with the same thing.
Because you feel like a hair and a biscuit most of your life.
Yeah. Or a hot dog at a Jewish picnic.
Yeah. Well, now they make kosher dogs now.
We can get Julia Fields here next week. Is that her name? Julia?
Child.
Yeah, Child, that's her. We've not even touched this yet.
I know.
But let's start with this question.
Okay.
What does the world say? I'm going to let you make an attempt to answer this. What does the world say about divorce? Now, we're not going to do the remarriage thing right now, but what does the world say about divorce?
Basically, most people today go into a marriage with the concept of, it's perfectly okay, and if it doesn't work out, call an audible.
I've had people, married couples, getting married, actually say to me, please don't put that in the vows, that you promise this for life.
Yeah.
You promise this to the end
Today.
of your life.
We're good today.
Because, a year down the road, what's going to happen? Or something's going to happen that I can't foresee. What am I going to do then?
Actually, we now live in a world that doesn't even look upon marriage as a necessary institution. Mm-hmm. Our government has even instituted laws to allow for the possibility that just commingling for a certain amount of time entitles you to the privileges and safety of what marriage offered all those who before made a commitment. We have denigrated marriage to now to where it is strictly a convenience and somewhat semi-protection for individuals who end up buying things together, and I mean it literally
paying
boils,
less taxes together
Yeah.
because they're not married.
it's actually a beneficial agreement, living agreement. It's basically
In our society, it's very apparent that every once in a while you have some kids that you're dealing with, or maybe at school, or maybe at church, and you've got a brother and two sisters, and they all have different last names.
yeah.
Now, I don't mean that in any racial way. That can happen to anybody at any time.
No.
But that goes back to what you said about what am I going to do that's right, that I believe the Bible teaches. And in some cases, like you said, they don't care what that book says.
No. Well, remember, from a historical perspective, it was at least 30 years ago that somewhere around the mid-90s it seems that it did change, early to mid-90s, that when you had an ethical question, you went to someone who knew the Bible. That began diminishing somewhere along the 80s.
And right in, I'm sorry I interrupted you, and right in the middle of that, you have people who are saying, I'm going to go talk to him and ask him what this says, and I hope he gives the answer that I'm thinking is right, that I want. And if I don't get the right answer that I want, I'll go someplace else and ask somebody else until I find somebody that agrees with
Tells me what I want.
Okay, let's start with the question again. What does the world say about divorce?
Perfectly okay.
The world has gone through a developmental stage about divorce where 100 years ago, there weren't very many people divorced. There were people who kind of stayed together and hung together. And the world says now, today, about divorce, if you want one, if you feel like getting one, go to the courthouse and get one.
Yeah.
And you don't have to ask anybody. You don't have to make any rules or regulations.
Actually, now there's what's called no fault.
No fault. It
Divorce.
ain't my fault.
No.
It's her fault.
Yeah. Well, it's just the fact that we're going to say there's nobody to blame here. Let's just, neither one of us lived up to what so we're not going to attach blame to anything.
One time in my life, I had a good friend at Elfview that came to me. He and his wife had just recently divorced, and he wanted to talk to me about what was going on in his life. He sat across the desk from me and said, this is the only time anybody's ever said this to me. He said, it was my fault 100%. It was my fault 100%.
Yeah.
Very few people would say that.
No.
But he was dead honest, you know. And that's what you said a little while ago. We like to blame. We like to tell other people it's their fault.
Well, there are many human conditions which get us in so much trouble. Feelings, and someone else is responsible for my plight in life. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not to blame for all. I made every right decision.
I'm going to move over here so the lightning doesn't strike me.
I didn't say that's what I believe. I'm saying that's what people say.
I got you.
Because I'm not about to hang out on that bridge.
Let's see what Mark, not this Mark, the
Mark
gospel writer Mark. Let's see what he says that the world teaches about divorce and remarriage, and what Mark read a little while ago, Mark chapter 10, at verse 6. Now, the people who were the contemporaries of Jesus had a much different vision than what Jesus had. Matter of fact, Jesus, when in this text, and I won't reread it, but you're welcome to reread it, and don't say reread too many times, because you'll come out sounding like me. When you read this, Jesus says there is one reason to legitimately get a divorce between two people. And it's not what'd you say a little while ago? Irreconcilable differences.
Irreconcilable, no fault.
It's no fault. Jesus never said, go ahead and get a no-fault divorce. Go ahead and say, it's their fault, it's not mine, and that will give you justification for what you're doing. Instead, he says, there is one reason to do this. And he talks about, in other passages, he talks about Moses giving them commands about marriage and about a man and a wife, about a male and a female.
And he basically just came out and said he was so frustrated with you that he went ahead and let you divorce. He just gave you the license to divorce.
It's a very unusual question because it sounds like God saying, well, I tried to get you guys to get this straightened out and I just failed, so go ahead and do what you want to do.
I know.
And that's our world today.
Well, here's the thing, though, Steve. The problem for those, and I know majority of who's watching our channel here are followers of Jesus Christ, and I think most of them would know that growing up in the Church of Christ, that divorce was, listen.
It was almost the unforgivable sin.
It was almost, well, in a roundabout way it was. It's amazing to me. We know that, and I really honestly believe, I don't think you could have anybody answer this question that has any understanding of reading the Bible that divorce is wrong. Okay? No more than you would have someone who said that murder was wrong, stealing is wrong, lying.
Matter of fact, you might get forgiven for murder faster than you would be forgiven for divorce.
In churches, you would have been. Mm-hmm. That's where the problem lied. No one can argue that divorce is not the behavior that God wants. But does that mean he excommunicates you and says you're never part of the, or that the divorce ruined what was intended to be a good thing? I mean, how many people who wanted to have a relationship with Jesus Christ that came to a Church of Christ and they found out they were divorced and said, well, yeah, you can become a member here, but you have to divorce your present wife and go back to your first wife. You
have to do what got you in trouble in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, now what kind of biblical sense does that make?
There is no biblical sense for that. The point has been, from the very beginning in what we read there, and the premise of what we're having our discussion about today is we let God decide what's acceptable and not acceptable. Now, having said that, if you're married to someone and you're a follower of Christ, you should do everything in your power, in your very own ability, to stay married to your spouse. Mm-hmm. I don't care.
And 90% of the people do that, I think.
Work on it.
Yeah.
And anybody who thinks that being married is a piece of cake, you've lost your mind. There's nothing easy sometimes about it. Now, it's to the degree that sometimes it's hard, is to the degree of also just how wonderful it is. Mm-hmm. And you're not always going to be on the high spots. There are going to be moments where it's hard.
A lot of people that I've talked to, and maybe, I'm certainly not an expert in this because I've never had to go through it, thank God. But a lot of people that I've talked with and had counseling with, people say after their divorce, I wish I'd tried harder. I really wish I'd have given it a second chance instead of just cutting it off and saying, I'm not even going to try anymore. And I'm not saying that's easy.
No.
Like I said, I've never, Susie's never thrown me outside in the backyard and said, you can come in when you start thinking and acting like I do.
Yeah.
And there are husbands and wives who have dealt with demands like that.
Well, here is a point of the very beginning of our premises. What does the world say? What does God say? When most people adhered to God's ideas, divorce was not really the problem that it is today. Now, having said that, doesn't mean that people's marriages out there were what they should have been. Okay? The one thing that we forgot to do is we enforced that most of the time the world treated marriage as long as the husband wanted you, you couldn't leave. Okay? Then what those same leaders in churches should have also been was reading some of Ephesians and asking them, okay, how are you treating your wife? How are you treating one another? Are you loving one another and devoted to one another? Are you treating her just like Jesus treats the church?
Paul says, I have to love my wife as much as I love myself, and I'm not going to hurt myself.
No.
So,
and Paul also writes that Jesus died. He loved the church so much that he died for them.
Yes.
His bride.
I had a lady come to me one time.
And we're going to have to start shutting it down, but you keep going. We're at that place.
A lady came to me one time and said, in essence, this is what she said. I know that the Bible teaches in Mark and 1 Corinthians, and by the way, if in your mind the definition of marriage is messed up in you, go memorize 1 Corinthians 7, because it answers so many questions about people in that situation. We've ignored it in the church because it doesn't say what we want it to say.
No.
This lady came to me one time, and Connie said, and nobody knows her, she lives in Texas somewhere, and I'm not going to tell you where she lives in Texas. But she came to me and she said, you know what, it's gotten so bad in my marriage. I know he hasn't cheated on me, but I pray every night, I hope he would cheat on me so I'd have a reason to divorce him. And I'm thinking, and then she told me other stories about, he was abusive, he beat her a couple times. I said, if I was a woman, a guy would beat me once. He would beat me once. And of course, there's situations where they're just scared to leave. They have to leave there. And she said, I pray that he cheats on me so I'll have a biblical reason for divorce. That's how far we've gone to the other side. And when Jesus says there's one reason. There's one reason. And when they were in the house, Jesus said, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. Now that's what Jesus said about divorce. He said there is a reason, a biblical reason. And that's why Connie was saying, I wish he'd cheat on me, because that's not in this verse. What's in this verse is, if he divorces me and I marry somebody else, I commit adultery. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery. That's a good place to stop, because what the world says is you can divorce your spouse for any reason you want. Doesn't make any difference what, he buys a car and you wanted a yellow one and he bought a red one. That's not a reason. This is the worst breakfast you've ever fixed me. I divorce thee, I divorce thee. Jesus said there was one reason for legitimate divorce, and that's found in Mark chapter 10, verse 12. Now, what we do with that afterwards, if somebody is divorced and it was not for that reason, what we do afterwards, that's where the fun begins. That's where you got the 15 preachers sitting in a circle all trying to explain that they think the best, that they're the best ones to talk to about the definition.
Yeah, to me, this subject is so convoluted. I mean, it would be like someone sitting down and asking, okay, exactly now, what is lying?
Well, we've dealt with this for 2,000 years.
Yeah, we've got it down now.
Because Jesus said, that's not what my Father intended for you. This is what my Father intended for you. And
I mean, shoot, if you want to get real technical, I mean, Adam should have divorced Eve right from the get-go. I mean, served him that. She served him that apple.
The principle behind that is, however smart your wife is, sometimes you don't need to listen to her. That's what I get out of that passage. Now you can.
All righty. Well, hey, listen.
Most of us have wives who are very, very tolerable.
Most
They
of us
put up
have
with
wives we don't deserve, okay?
Oh, my grandpa used to say, Steve, you outkicked your coverage.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's for sure. Well, on behalf of Steve and I, we appreciate you tuning in, and probably the next one, I will have someone else sitting in Steve's chair, and so still tune in.
Tune in anyway.
Tune in anyway, because it won't just be me, because I wouldn't do that to you. So on behalf of Steve and I, have a great week, and God bless.